I would like to start, if you can sort of start to introduce yourself, and we take a round, and then we go into the debate. Yes.
My name is microphone, whatever. My name is Richard Schechner, and it's on, yeah, okay. And I'm from New York and elsewhere.
Okay, so my name is Laurent Chetouane, and I'm French and live in Berlin.
Hello, my name is Gisela Mendoza. I'm from Peru. I was born in Peru and raised in Peru. I live in Portugal. I do theater of the oppressed.
Yeah, we have the microphone.
My name is Jeppe Christensen. I live in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and I work together with two in a company called Fix and Foxy.
My name is Veronika Böckelmann. I'm originally from Germany, but I also took some education here in Norway at the Akademie for Scenekunst. And I lived at different places in the last years. I worked in Buenos Aires, in Berlin, and the last year I was in New York. And yeah, my background is documentary theater, installations, and performance art, and here we'll work with lecture performances.
I'm Mike Bonanno. I'm with a group called the Yes Men, and we do political interventions in the media and public space.
Hi, and I am, as Jeppe said, too, working with Jeppe in the company Fix and Foxy, living in Denmark.
So what the idea of the debate is to try to sort of stretch out from your own area of competence and try to sort of think together and brainstorm. So some of my questions sometimes will feel a bit open, and that's also a sort of purpose. They should work as a sort of trampoline so that we can start to think together. And framing the question is also a part of the thing we try to do together. So I'd like to start with something really, really open, but I think it's very important to hear the different what you think about this thing, the different perspectives. And I'd like to start with if you could define a bit what is acting for you. What is acting for you?
Asking all of us?
Yes, and I'd like to start with you, Richard, if you want.
Well, 3 hours later, he was still talking. Because this, my answer is also directed as a question to Laurent. Laurent was talking very brilliantly, it seems to me, within the tradition of naturalistic acting. Be yourself, strip yourself open, etc. It wouldn't make much sense to Mélenchon, who Brecht also saw in 1936 in a banquet in Moscow, and it kind of gave rise to Brecht's enunciation of the Verfremdung effect. So Mélenchon played women in the Kunshu tradition of Chinese opera. So to me, acting is a vast, broad spectrum of behaviors, beginning at kind of realistic, naturalistic, Western, positivistic kind of acting that Laurent describes, which I am attracted to, of course, but going all the way over to codified acting, where the character exists outside the actor in the tradition, just as a suit of clothes exists in a closet that I can put on. And the question is, who can I put it on well? So Mélenchon was able to put on the clothes, that is the complete representation of beings he was not. Young, living in classical times in Chinese, and female. He could also take those clothes off and be a man in a banquet's Western tuxedo at a banquet, etc., etc. He was not a transgendered person, so he was not enacting his person, he was enacting that. In the middle is some kind of dialogue enacting between the naked actual and the highly codified. I think for me, my job as a performer, performance maker, theorist, and acting or performing teacher, and I want to make a distinction between acting and performing in a minute, is to know where on that range I want the people I'm working with to play, and to train them to play all along that range, to be somebody they absolutely are not in a convincing way, but recognized as a codified behavior in the same way as one, not only Mélenchon, would see a violinist play a violin. The violin is not the violinist, but the violinist is playing the violin. The Corelli is not the language of the violinist. At the same time, I like jazz improvisation on a violin, etc., etc., etc. To be able to shift almost instantly from highly codified to, let's call it, ordinary from the Western positive sense acting, to the kind of, let's say, baseline performance that Laurent was talking about. One last word, difference between acting and performing. Now these are a technical difference, and I realize I'm speaking my own private English with the ambition of making it a universal language. Not English, my own private English. So acting is a subcategory of performing. We, from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death, are performing. That is, we're doing something that we did not invent, but that we can manipulate. And acting is a subset of that. When we carve out for ourselves, either as artists or as theorists or as spectators, a special kind of performing. That's what Laurent was trying to do. And he was trying to move dangerously, in the interesting sense, close to the boundary between performing and acting. So I'll leave it for that for now.
Thank you. Yes.
The last point, I would exactly think like this too, that acting for me is an under category of the question, I would call it, of the presence in a space. It's a mode of under 1,000 others there. It's like a reaction or a way of reacting on something else, which is actually happening before. So I would not say acting is a byproduct. I would call it like this, yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's funny. I think my micro is not working. Yeah, now it's working. I think acting is the most natural thing that we all do. We act all the time. We are all great actors every single day. So we explore, we carry inside us a lot of different characters that we just take them and use them how it fits, how it's needed during our whole life. And that's, I think, it's very interesting. It's giving ourselves the possibility really to explore ourselves. And I think it's also, for me, the acting really on stage is the possibility to trigger and to enable something with someone so that we can establish a dialogue. It's, I want to dialogue with you. That even if you sometimes are not allowed to say anything, I am already acknowledging what you, if you agree or not. So for me, acting should be this, fostering, triggering, enabling a dialogue for us to talk, to dialogue, to discuss.
We can pass this.
Yes, I don't know actually. I don't have a personal theory about what art is. It's what acting is. To be honest, I'm not really interested in defining it. I'm not a theorist. I'm very practical in my work, and for each of our projects, we need different tasks solved. And all our work is solving these problems. And sometimes we need an actor to solve them. We need somebody who can remember lines and know how to make a character. But I don't have a frame where I say, okay, this is acting. I can teach you acting. I know what acting is. But I can look at people I know, Danish actors, and say, okay, I like the stuff you do. The way you behave in front of an audience, I would like that in my performance. That would solve a problem for me. And the way you think, the way you are in rehearsals, that's great. I would like to work with you, and you can help me solve problems. So that's it, more or less, from my personal point of view.
For me, I think it's two things. On one hand, personally, I grew up or got my theater experience in Berlin, where I think it's very close to what Laurent was describing, that the border of performance and acting goes very close together, like with Kastorf in the Volksbühne, who would not only be silent when you laugh, but throw potato salad at you when you leave. So for me, this close combination of acting and performance is something very natural. And then personally, I don't think I can make a huge, all-embracing acting theory, but what I'm interested in with exploring with my work is to see a trained actor as a person who is very sensitive also in terms of perceiving space, in terms of perceiving what kind of experience they create in a room together with the people. And then I explore a genre, documentary theater, where actors are almost as a role in crisis, like many theater creators who make documentary theater don't even work with actors. And I find it interesting for myself, coming from an acting background, how can I reclaim this space? And that also means that the role of the actor shifts a little bit. The actor may become a researcher partly, or the actor may present more than represent. But yeah, this is questions I explore right now.
I don't know. This is kind of new to me, and I'm excited to hear about the, I guess, the distinction between performance and acting. And I guess from my perspective, I'm not really sure where to draw the line, but I'm really interested in this idea of performance and what we do every day and how we perform differently for different people. And in our work with the Yes Men, one of the things we've been concentrating on lately is the idea of casting trained non-performers, like policemen, for example, who know their role very well and are very important in many of our dramas because they come in and they arrest you, and they do it in a way that's really efficient and predictable, and they play their character really well, and if you cast them well, then you have a drama. And so it's sort of that kind of working with non-actors, but who are trained and have a very specific goal that I'm kind of interested in now.
And that could be the way we're working actually in Fix and Foxy. But we're also using actors. We have used all kinds of people in our things, in our projects, and for us it's the project that is the main goal for it. And as Jeppe told, we are interested in people, and they could be actors or policemen and all kinds of people. I don't think I have anything else to add, because I really don't, I'm not interested in the question, what is acting? And I'm not clever enough to answer it.
Okay, that was very good. I started from this question because I'd like today, in the short time we have, to focus on the problem of acting training and how the audience come into the problem of acting training. And I'm asking you this question also to you that work with we had this kind of specific point of view, because I think one thing that's happening is, anyway, there's a consequence from the things you do. And it's very interesting to see that you don't start from the question, what is acting, or the problem of acting. But anyway, there's an audience, there's people that interact with the products or the things or the things you produce. And these create a sort of standard, a new standard, or create a new expectation from the audience. And this has a huge echoes for actors when they train, because they want to have some of the qualities that come out from the things you create. For example, when you create your performances or your actions with Yes Man, and so this creates some kind of problem or consequences in the way we think training, in the way we train actors. For example, in this school, or we have another school in the north of Norway. So. Today I'd like to sort of hear a bit what you think about this problem of acting training, and how do you think, what are the consequences of an acting training also in thinking the audience? Is the acting training already creating an audience? Do you create an audience already when you start to train an actor for a specific kind of work or a specific kind of theater? I'd like to start to hear a bit from Richard, if you want, if you have some ideas about this.
Well, actually, I've been writing something else, so let somebody else go first.
Yeah, Gisela.
I wasn't listening to you.
Well,
Training, right? You were talking about training.
Well, it's like, I think it's a debate. We just say what we just think, and we're not answering really like the questions to the. So something that I was talking to him in the break that I really think we should all think about it is, and especially if you're posing the question of training, and especially having a look to people that are future actors or are current working as actors and actresses, is I think it's like the whole system trains us to be a piece of a certain machine, so that the whole machine works perfectly. And I think this is in theatrical things, I think in all areas of our society, because I think the whole system works better, works faster, is more efficient, is more cost effective, is all these words that we have for stating something to be good and to be effective and efficient. I think that's what also training do with us. Even, I mean, if it's actor or not, it's like we all train to be the perfect piece for this perfect machine that should work perfectly. And that's one of the things that I would just like to discuss, because I really don't, this is the time now, with all the things that are happening in Europe, and not only in Europe, that we just start rethinking all this training process, starting from school, from the crash, from school, from the job. It's always like it's already written down what should be the result. And I think it's probably a good moment to just, for us, a little bit inspired by the speech in the morning, is like, just be there so that you can actually tell us what you want to be at the end of this training. What's the training that you want to have? Instead that we say, the school says this is the training, that we ask the audience or our clients, so, you want to become an actor. Any thoughts about that? What would you like to become as an actor?
Great. Anybody else who wants to say? Yeah.
Well, you know, what I was writing was a graph and certain life roles. It's interesting among us because I love theorizing, and I love the relationship between a set of abstractions and actual experiences. You know, the abstractions are almost my imagination, and the experiences are what I have to come back to. So I was writing here a graph, and it has to do with training, and I was saying, horizontally on this graph, we go from so-called real life to absolutely codified performance. Not only in acting, codified performance. We're now involved in codified performance here. If I don't know that, you would say that perhaps that was breaking some of the rules. And if I unzipped my pants and showed myself, I would be breaking more of the rules. So we know. But I restored my authority by coming back to my bass voice. If I didn't come back to my bass voice, if I had continued to rant until someone took the microphone away, then one would wonder, well, has he lost his marbles? Which means, is he not aware that he's leaving the codified agreement, the contract that the dean or the rector was asking? So we're all involved in expectations and obligations. And we violate those expectations and obligations for radical political reasons, for parodic reasons, and sometimes when we violate them and we don't have control over a violation, we're thought to be insane, you see. And then later on, society may catch up with us. You know, was Artaud insane? If so, why do we honor his theories? Was Van Gogh, you know, totally nuts? If so, why do we look at his paintings? So that there are lots of deep problems about this. All right, so that goes from real to codified. The vertical axis was from ordinary life to art. And some of the roles that I said we should think about was a newscaster, a politician, a husband and wife at home, a Jingju performance playing a female, a subway rider, a metro rider, a professional athlete doing play, a professional athlete doing a product endorsement, a young child who is being toilet trained, a bride and groom at their ceremony and at the first night after their ceremony, a film actor, a person in a documentary film who does not know she is being filmed, a panelist at a conference, a jury member, a trial lawyer in court, a judge presiding in court, a TV judge, a waiter, and a chef, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the question of training is, who are we training? For what kind of roles? Now for me, when I do my training, which those of you who are taking my workshop will see, I am working, burning a candle at two ends. At one end is this codified behavior, exactly what Laurent was talking about. I have an exercise called Don't Follow Your Impulse. You'll do it. You stand in front of a line, and in front of this line, I say first, well, you're going to cross to this other side of the room. And you're going to cross in very slow motion. I want you to stand there and get your first impulse. So everybody's like that. And I said, no, you can't use that impulse. Throw it away. What's your second impulse? Third, you keep going until you have a menu of impulses. Then you've got to go back over them. Am I going to take the first item on my menu, the second, the fifth, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one kind of exercise, because it's a paradox. I want to train performers, not just actors, performers, to be totally aware of what they're doing and to be able to let go into not being aware of what they're doing. Because another graph is reflexive self-consciousness and being in the flow. You know, anyone who's a gamer, and I'm a gamer, but I mean something even like chess, I don't mean video games so much. No, you play best when you're not thinking about playing. At the same time, even unless you know the rules so deeply that they're second nature, as I know the rules of English grammar or the rules of presenting myself before 83 people, I counted you, I always count the house. So you know those rules, then you can better prepare yourself for performing in front of them. When I say I don't just train actors, I'm interested in the theater in the same way as I'm interested in going to a restaurant. There's good and bad, but I eat even when I don't go to the restaurant. And I like to eat well. So I'm also interested in training people to perform in their ordinary lives. That is, to be conscious of their gestures, to have some control over their gestures, and to be able to decide whether to just go with the flow or be very reflexive.
Would you say that an actor who trained like that would be better in performing the policeman he was talking about?
I think if you work with me, you're better in doing everything. I mean, why just them? In other words, the idea is that in life, as in art, it's this tension between just not knowing what you're doing and doing it right, Jackson Pollock, if you will, and Mondrian or Modigliani, who must have controlled every stroke. So the thing is to not become rigid and orthodox. As we grow older, the tendency, the desire to become orthodox, to be right in every situation, grows very strong. The desire to say, well, I did that when, or I remember that. You know, dementia is a really good thing when you lose a certain memory, because then you're more in the moment.
Laurent, can I ask you something? It seems to me, for example, in relationship to your experience, you experience something as an audience, or you have some kind of need as an audience, then you start to have an artistic need, but then you don't have the people that can function in that artistic need, and then you create training so that you create sort of the actors or the performers that can answer to that artistic need. Are you also creating a new audience with that?
I don't know if I create a new audience. I think there are some people who wants, I mean, in Berlin, I would say I have an audience now, which comes to see because they know what they look at. In terms of perception, what I hear is that people, when they go in it or they enter it, that they perceive differently. So in that sense, maybe. I remember one person telling me after a show that when she went home, she was looking at the commercials in the metro, and she saw suddenly how the commercials are manipulating her. And that was nice.
Okay. Yeah?
On what you said?
Yes?
On what you said, I think, isn't it like that what we want to do in a way? I mean, we have this impact in audience, and they think a little bit on what we did. And this is a way of like, you do influence people just by them. I mean, especially in the work that we do in Portugal, or the methodology that we work is like audience are there and are invited to get on stage, and they participate not only discussing, but also on stage acting their propositions. So I think that's what we do. Art has this powerful capacity of touching people and just giving someone a little bit to think or to remember or to, I don't know, like, so we are, with what we do, we are always, it's not, I don't like the word creating audience. I think it's always very pedagogical. I think art is always very this.
Okay, I'll change it then with the theater of the oppressed with Augusto.
No,
Well, could we say that then you kill the audience with the idea of actors?
No, I think we're educating audience, and I think it's wonderful if you work in any kind of profession where you have the possibility. Is one thing that it's very in fashion to say is like, yeah, we work together and I want to learn from you and you learn, you know, I'm the teacher, but you know, I also want to, it's like really to do that and to provoke that and to go home yourself and see there was a shitty performance and you said like, oh my God, what happened? You know, this is, I think it's wonderful. We are educating and we're being educated. We educate audiences, people, and people educated us, even if you're on stage. So that was a little bit.
Going back to you, Mike, did you ever experience then your policeman wasn't able to perform himself as a policeman?
No, they're
quite good.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's interesting. I was thinking about it as I listened, and I actually think that the thing about most policemen is that they're not self-aware. They're not considering their role as they play it, and they're trained to not ask questions of their situation or to not be exposed at all. And so as a result, they generally follow their roles very predictably. There's occasionally, if you know the law really well and you can defend yourself and give them questions that make them pause. And I think a good example of probably where the situation changes the performance would be like, for instance, the clashes recently in Spain, where the police were confronted with a protest of off-duty firefighters who were all dressed in uniform, right? So here we have two different sets of actors in costume, and the police, you know, had to consider whether or not they were willing to go beat firefighters who are also well armed. So whether this clash between these two public service agencies should happen or not. And they did actually go in and attack the firemen. But as a result, it was, you know, front page of the New York Times. So I mean, it was a successful performance, maybe more successful for the firefighters, as is the case usually with civil disobedience. When one group is being beaten, it's the ones they're the ones who usually win they have a successful, I think then the performance is considered successful.
Can I ask you something? Maybe you are among the people we have here. The work of your group is the one that goes more across media in a way. So your audience is not just the audience that is there in the event, but is sort of is an audience that is growing somehow.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like we have three audiences. So what we usually do is, I mean, often our events start with a performance where the audience is at a business conference. They don't know that they're the audience. They think they're just attending a conference. And they see an actor who is representing a company like Shell Oil, but they don't know that it's an actor. They think it's really somebody from Shell. And in a lot of ways, then the performer, the actor performing, is actually better when they're worse. I mean, in the traditional sense of what people would consider acting, which means that, yeah, if they're exposed, if they're nervous, if they've never acted before, then they just seem like an awkward presenter at a conference. And they don't have that much confidence, which is fine, because the audience doesn't know that they're an actor. And so, and none of the things that are, I guess, conservatively associated with acting are a problem, like convincing the audience that they're real, because they're already real, right? So in the minds of the audience, and in fact,
would you say you would have to train an actor to be not as good, but as bad as possible?
Well, maybe, I don't really know, actually. I mean, maybe it's possible. It's just we have had situations where trained actors have volunteered and done that role, and they've been very good. They just seem like a confident performer. Although I think it does lose something, because the awkwardness often creates some kind of awkward tension with the audience, and I think it's probably a little to do with what Laurent and Richard were saying, and for me this is sort of new to consider it as part of why it works to have somebody who's not trained speak in front of a conference, especially because the audience at those conferences, we usually set it up so that whoever is speaking is perceived to be the most important person in the room. You know, they're the assistant to the CEO, or they work for the regulatory body that everybody in the room wants to suck up to. And so everybody's ready to kiss their ass. And so as a result, if there's some awkwardness or nervousness, it just kind of sets things off. Somehow it's not as, the relationships aren't as clear. Because they're there to like the people in the audience are there to experience authority.
Yeah, theoretically, I've called this kind of thing dark play. So dark play is when one of the players doesn't know, or one group of players doesn't know that the other person is playing. And there's an enormously long history in culture, in con games and all kinds of activities, undercover agents, double agents, and so on. So Yes Men plays on this notion of dark play and of half deception. In other words, you are deceived, but I am not deceived about myself. And the one who has the full information, the one who says, I know I am not who I say I am, and I know who you are, has a great advantage, as the con person always does, over the one who only has part of the information. So they're able to play on that, and because they're able to play on that, any behavior works, because the people over here have an investment in believing you are who you say you are. And so if we're here discussing the audience in that case authorizes, valorizes whatever behavior they receive. I do a study of performance in India, totally different, where boys are thought to be gods. And it's called Ram Leela. I've studied for a long time. And sometimes these boys vomit. So this is not what the god Rama usually does. He usually doesn't get sick and vomit and have diarrhea in front of everybody. And so when you ask a spectator, how can God, because these are not boys playing gods, these are the gods. They say, the god is free to do whatever the god wishes to do. The god at this point wishes to vomit. The god at this point wishes to defecate. So it fits right within their worldview. It's exactly what you're saying. And if you think about it in these terms, so how do you train for that kind of thing? So At one level, you don't train except a certain set of gestures. You have to wear a suit and tie, you have to get up there. More training is less. I would say that completely competent actor who knows she or he is playing an executive might have more problem because they're trying to play themselves, and they may have a little more problem. One wants to get somebody naive in that situation.
But do they have a problem with the role, or do they have a problem with the contract with the audience?
Well, the two converge in this kind of performance. I mean, these are performances that are performances in everyday life, I would say. I'll give you one more anecdote. So I used to study, for a time I studied surgery. Not like Laurent was an engineer. I was just pretending to study surgery. And I was in the, and because I'm Dr. Richard Schechner, I have access to the NYU Medical School. And I never correct people when I say I'm Dr. Richard Schechner. So they never say you medical doctor. They just assume that's their mistake, not mine. I am Dr. Richard Schechner. So I'm in, and what I was trying to study at this point was the different behaviors that go on when someone is doing non-life-threatening cosmetic surgery. In this particular case, where they were working on a woman who had been badly disfigured in a car crash. And they were on operation 29 of a series of some 30 operations they were doing to reconstruct her face. And the other operations I was studying were the operations where life was in danger, open heart surgery, brain surgery, and so on. So I won't get into the details of the very, very big differences, how the doctors perform themselves. But to only say, when I showed up in scrubs and it said Dr. Richard Schechner and I was in one of these things, the surgeon in residence who was performing the surgeries turned to me and said, "Doctor, I'm glad to have you here. We would like to make the first incision," which is a kind of, a gesture. You just make a slight cut. It's like throwing out the ball in the baseball game. And I said, normally I would, but in this particular case, I think I'll defer to you, doctor. So, so within this range, within the range of a network of belief, you see almost everything is possible. Now we go into the theater, the ordinary theater, because you buy a ticket, because you come with a certain knowledge. But what if one were to stage a play in which all the actors were not actors and you put them on as actors? In other words, a completely fraudulent production of Shakespeare or Molière. That would be very, very interesting. And the people would come there and you would try to pretend it's avant-garde because everybody would be holding their scripts and they would never have seen it before. It probably would be a great success if it was advertised in the proper way. Because the net of belief is extraordinarily powerful.
Thank you. One last question, and then we'll do something else. Jeppe, you talked about we have problems and we have to fix these problems. Do you think actors can be trained to be problem fixers? And in that case, would you choose them, or would you still go after people that you think are more competent than them to fix these problems?
Well, basically, I think problem solving is a competence. So that would be one of the things I would be looking for. But from my point of view, it's really hard to understand why anybody would want to be an actor. I know it has a great aura, but the kind of work we do, we just pick people. It's like we go into a supermarket and say, I want you, and I want you, and I want you. And as an actor in that kind of theater, you don't really have a role until you're picked. And I don't think you can train yourself thinking, oh, I'm first year student, I really want to be in a Fix and Foxy production. I'll work really hard for 4 years and then they'll pick me. Because maybe we want to do a performance about opera and then we go pick an opera singer. Or we want to do performance about prostitution, then we don't need an actor, we need a prostitute.
But you have studied in theater schools. I mean, what your background, both of you, right? If I'm not mistaken. So what has been your relationship through your studies to acting? Is what you're doing a reaction to acting, or as a sort of also from an audience point of view?
Yes, as an audience, I know there's a certain kind of acting that I like. Yes, educated to like German theater, the kind of non-acting, just do stuff on the stage and throw some potato salad. And I like that as an audience, but that's not necessarily what I need in my performances. And we have a group of actors that we use regularly, and they are extremely different. And they each have they had different qualities. Maybe all of them are really good at making some kind of contact with the audience, of not the classical way, not having this fourth wall, being the ability to say hi, welcome, is very important for us.
So you would use an actor that has trained with Laurent?
I don't know. I'm really sorry I haven't seen your work. I would like to. I'd like to see some video, because I like the things you say, but still I'm not able to say, oh yes, that's what I need. I think the way we work with actors is very personal. We know them very well, and we say, yes, to this performance we need Egil again. He's good at this. Or it would be fun to have Daniel, because he has some crazy ideas that would be really great. And then we take some risks and invite somebody that we don't know at all, and in the rehearsals we try to use what they are able to do. So I think if I should say something, it's really important that you can something, that you're good at something, and then I can pick that because you are good at this one thing if I need it.
Yes. Can I ask you a question too? Sometimes in your performances, also the audience can have a part on stage. Am I right?
Yeah.
And when does an audience stop being an audience and becomes an actor? Or where does an actor stop being an actor and becomes an audience? Or in your performances, in your work?
I want to discuss that with Laurent later on. the idea of as long as there are an audience gazing at you, it will interact somehow. And for us, it's like always in a performance when we have this audience. We have been down to like having one person as an audience in a performance, but there has to be this kind of audience, or just like just the camera filming it, so we could stream it on the internet somehow. So they are always a part of the performance, of course. It's very important that they are there, and for us, it's like we haven't been working with the idea that well, let's just cut off the audience and just do our thing. We haven't tried that. That would be a great experiment someday, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. To elaborate, I think the natural instinct in our work is to say that we are all part of the same thing. It's not like you are gazing at us. If we were arranging this event, we would invite, let's make a circle instead of this awkward, I'm talking to you and you're just listening, and I know everybody here is smarter than me, so that would be the way we would do it.
We're gonna do that.
Okay, great.
To close, before I give some space to the audience to ask a couple of questions, I'd like to see if any one of you wants to ask each other a question. If you're curious about, if you have a question for, if not, we just give the word to the audience. You don't have to feel obliged to do that. Yeah?
Perhaps,
yeah.
For me, one really interesting question is when it comes to the education of actors is also in institutional terms, and maybe I will ask you then, if I may, because as we hear from many of the artists who are invited, they are not interested in working with actors, and I think that is internationally a huge trend right now, that many big festivals, for instance, one Ciudades Paralelas, which was traveling internationally, called for performances without actors. So when you train actors here, how do you react to these new challenges creatively? Like how can, and I think it starts probably with who do you take into the education? What do you want an actor to be? Where, yeah, it's a huge question, I guess, but maybe you can.
Is this for me?
Yeah.
Okay, should I answer this question?
Briefly.
Yeah, briefly. Well, you know, it's a complicated thing. Let's say there there is first of all a role, which is the role of the institution that you have to take in, and it's not easy to change overnight. But what it's interesting, I think, is that there is a transformation going on all the time, because there is people going to watch performances, to watch theater, and now with the internet and stuff. So there is a dialogue, and there is a different expectations from the students and from also the directing students. So they are challenging and they're problematizing what we do. And so I think is more them that make this dynamic. And at the same time, we try to respond to that with in different ways, and we probably don't agree on the ways. And of course, there is always a tension between what you feel you are losing and what you feel you're gaining. But I mean, that's what I was trying also to make you sensitive to, the fact that anyway, even if you don't think, or you start from an acting point of view, what the things you do have a big consequence on education or institutions like this that have to problematize the way we talk to actors, the way we work with actors in a room, and the words we use, and you know, are we creating already an aesthetic when we choose the actors in the auditions? Are we already creating a sort of audience that these actors will hunt for the rest of their life as an idealistic spectator when we train them? Can we create a school that is really able to answer to all the possibilities of acting, as Richard is saying, or should we focus on something specific and try to be good in that? So all these questions we try to deal with, and I think this festival is a way of dealing with these questions. Yeah, if I've answered, yeah.
I think I would not agree in saying that I'm not interested to work with actors. I would say it's depending what the relation the actors have with their acting. So that's a huge difference. I love to work with actors depending what kind of relation or distance or way they think about what they do actually. And some actors, I think it's important too that actors have a kind of base on which they grow, and after it can anything happen. The problem is just when you believe that's the only way of acting, then it's becoming dangerous. But if not, yes, they need an education, and I think a school has to decide for a way. And then the actor has to deal with what he became, and he can go in totally different direction.
Yeah, if I can add something, yeah, this awareness is what we try to create. This awareness of, now you're experiencing this, but this is not the thing or the only thing, or this is a contract in a way. This awareness, and then now we're also starting a master, and this one has the goal to problematize all these things.
Just one sentence, because I also, as an artist, I only work with trained actors or trained performers, because they be dancers, musicians. As a theorist, I'm interested in the broad spectrum. I wouldn't train people if I didn't want to work with them. So it's two totally different things.
Okay, yes?
Actually, I just want to say that the acting school in Denmark has a really great influence on what we do, because we're really depending on fundings in our projects. And what we have seen through the years is that if we are like applying for a project where there will be no professional actors, we'll get no money. So sometimes we actually invent projects that have like one actor or two actors, because then we can get funding. And then afterwards we can say, well, after second thought, we think it would be great without actors. No, so actually you have a great influence on how we work, or at least how we make our applications. Because I don't think we are standing strong in Denmark with our work, because it's really difficult to get fundings for what we are doing, because it's very traditional, saying theater is with professional actors, at least in Denmark.
One of the things we'll talk about in the future will be also the definition of what is professional and what is we'll talk about that later. Any questions before we go and have some food? Yes? I will come. If you can say the question for.
Yeah.
Here's some microphones in case other people are interested when it comes later.
My question is to Richard. I appreciated very much how you connect your theorist activity and your performative activity, and also now in your speech when you kind of went crazy. And I would like like to know how what this is about when you go crazy. Is it really about going crazy, or is it also discussing what is normality and what is craziness? And if it is discussing this, is it then, because you said if you would continue for a long time, then you probably would run into problems. And is that correct, or is it good that it is like this, that you would run into problems, or are you really is it a fundamental discussion of these forms of conventions? Thank you.
I'll be very brief. I think all behavior is conventionalized. When it violates those conventions or codes strongly, then the group decides that the person is irrational, sick, demented, whatever. If one is within an artistic frame, in quotation marks, and one can do that because everybody says they're doing that within the frame. And that frame is usually an artistic frame. Sometimes it's simply a frame that's familiar to people. So for example, if you have a person in your neighborhood who behaves in a very eccentric way, somebody from outside that neighborhood may put a different judgment on that person, or in your own family, than you will. So I'm trying to say that all behavior is qualified by social convention. And we who make art from behavior have to be very familiar with the local conventions that we're using, and insofar as we can, the conventions of other cultures.
And then also respect them.
Respect them? You know, now you're making me make a moral judgment. Sometimes I think they're for shit. But the question, I theoretically respect them because I can learn from them. You know, a radical example is, I understand Nazism, and I want to understand it, and fascism, and et cetera, and other forms of genocide. That doesn't mean I respect them. Insofar, if you'll say anything you pay attention to, you respect, then I do respect them. You know, having respect for the tiger is not petting the tiger, but understanding how the tiger works. So at a theoretical level, I have respect for all that is. At an ethical level, I make my judgments, of course. I feel we all need lunch. Yeah. At an ethical level or a theoretical level?
As tigers. Okay, thank you for this first day, morning, and have a great lunch, and try to be on time and find your way in the workshops. Thank you.